himself. We know Maxime is a player who can go on tilt. We've seen it happen.
Yep.
And I think it's very important for Maxime to keep his nerves in check, to make sure that he's feeling like, okay, every game is a fresh one. Every move is an opportunity for me to improve on what I've been doing. So just take a breath, take a breather. And so didn't we just see this?
What was the advice we were given? Who said it?
Do you see how quickly they just played this? I mean, they
played the same way. Yeah, I guess
those.
we'll focus on that. But I think there's something to be said for making sure your last moment, your last memory of a game is not like the most negative emotional one. Like, take a breath, calm yourself, try to figure out why you blundered, maybe what the positive takeaway is, and then resign and move on, right? I think there is something to be said for that, Robert, especially in matches like this where you don't have a rest day to do it. You got to do it now in the middle of the show, right? And I think that that's kind of what you were touching on, right?
Yeah. And he changed this opening by taking on F5 first, unlike in the last game when he allowed that tension to still
Let's
exist.
back up and show it real quick, because I was highlighting that psychological point. But yeah, right here is where the difference maker was, everyone. Instead of bishop c4, which is what we just saw in game 5, if you're keeping track closely, Maxime took on f5. And by the way, I like this better because to me, this is the version I was trying to explain when I was justifying black's position, is that you don't want to castle in a lot of ways. You want to use the G file. What you don't want is what happened in that last game. You don't want the B5 move to be a move you can't take back, and white makes it a two-line scenario where both sides become open. So I think this is a better version for Maxime than he had earlier.
I agree. And right now, after queen d5, the c2 pawn can be captured. And so what is Wesley thinking by giving up this pawn? Maybe he just wants to play rook c1 after it, which is why Maxime keeps the position closed. But a very interesting decision right there that I think needs further analysis. That, well, I would love to ask them at some point.
I like the decision not to take it. This is what white wants in these night. If you want a line board, right? You want open. Why can't I figure out the right way to say that? What is the right way to say you want open lines on both sides of the board? There you go. Okay. Wow, that was hard.
You did it.
You want open lines on both sides of the board. Queen takes b7 is an issue. So this is what you want to avoid in any Najdorf where your king has to be in the center, everybody. You can get away with this as long as it's not a two open line scenario. So that's exactly what Wesley is trying to do, is open up lines on both sides of the board.
Yeah.
I'm going to retire. I'm going to retire for this match. I can't speak today, buddy.
It's okay. I'll forgive you eventually. So here, the tension on d6, he just captures it, and bishop f4. So look at that rook on g8. You were talking about this earlier. Is the king going to sit on d7, Danny?
Oh, I love it.
I mean, you might have to. You might not really have many choices here. And the great news of this bishop on f4 is it covers the f-file and covers the c1 square, because rook a to c1 would be a very good move in most positions, but you can't do it without just giving me a free rook.
Yep. And also the time. The time is suggestive to me that Maxime is back in his comfort zone. This is the kind of Najdorf he needs to get today. These positions are ones that, frankly, he has more experience than any of his peers, any of the best players in the world. And it's not. I'm not saying the position is objectively good for. I mean, it's a very unclear position. But it's a position that he knows well and that he can play. And again, that king on d7. This is a Najdorf. This is like a walk in the park for a Najdorf player. No big deal.
Yep. And he can play queen e6 if he needs to kick this queen out of the d5 square. Yep. And it's very difficult for white to kick this bishop off of f4. And he does it by playing bishop e3, but now queen e6 forces the queens off the board, it seems, because either you lose the d6 pawn right away, or you trade queens and then take on f4, and then I take on d6.
And probably objectively we're headed for a draw, but still I would say that's a good result given how badly black's games have been for Maxime today, right? He's really hasn't figured out his openings until this one.
Yeah, no, this was by far his best game with the black pieces. It felt double-edged. Both sides actually had chances, whereas in the other games, he was just kind of getting positionally steamrolled. It seemed like everything was going in Wesley's favor. Here, only black can be better in this endgame, I think, because if you trade the rooks, you have this e-pawn, which is already directly a pass pawn, and that can be quite a nuisance, especially if your king gets cut off. So, like, if you play king e5 maybe, and then king d4, what if I just get my king in? Okay, he starts with e5, which also makes sense. But I'm thinking if that black king starts venturing into enemy territory, not only is it helping the pass pawn, but it can also go over to the queen side to attack these two white pawns over there as well.
No, it's fantastic. And, yeah, the passed pawn will be the difference maker if somehow Maxime can get an edge. Something tells me best play, again, rook ending, newsflash, best play might be leading to a draw. But if rook e7 comes here, okay, he goes rook c7, which has ideas of check, check, and then start gobbling. But rook e7, just getting the rook behind the pawn is always something to keep an eye on in these rook endings.
And the essential question right now is if king g2, rook c2 check, rook f2 is possible, and I think it is, in which case white will be better in that king and pawn end game. There's a difference between the rook end game and the pawn end game. The reason why I'm saying the pawn end game would be so good for white is you have the outside pawns. In this case, the h and g pawns. But he went king f3 first. This is just a very... Now it's getting very dicey.
Because what he wants is g5, and the king runs this way to help, I think.
Uh-huh. He wants to snag the h7 pawn.
He can still do it. He can take and then play g5. The checks, whatever happened first, are kind of just based on their calculation that they can do that Robert and I can't right now because they're engaged. But you really just want to be, okay, now he didn't get it in time. The whole point of having g5, everybody, was so you could meet this check with king to g4. Now he has to go back to g2 if he wants to hold h3.
But instead he's just going to make a draw.
Okay, so we're gonna just Maxime. Okay, so now Maxime has the taste in his mouth for the first time today of letting one go that he feels like he could have won, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,